The Detroit Red Wings have played their first two games under Todd McClellan with mixed results against some tough competition. Patrick Kane reaches a milestone. We've got all that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. It is great to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Red Wings, Brian Fisher. And Brian, not a dull moment around Detroit these days. Last week, Todd McClellan in as the new head coach. They start him off with games against Toronto and Washington. Certainly no easy task. What was your first impression of any difference that McClellan made in the first two games?
Well, the first thing I want to do, Gil, is take that game against Toronto and throw it out the window. Because Todd McClellan quite literally started his job on that Friday. He had his press conference. They did a morning skate. He said in the press conference, I can't wave a magic wand and fix everything. Like, the goal tonight is to go play hockey. It'll be a similar lineup. They'll be playing the system they've been playing because I can't implement a new system in a 45-minute practice. So I just want to see what this team has. I just asked them to go out there with energy, play hard, play smart. And then they lost 5-2. The underlying numbers looked fine in that game, but they got exposed hard by a much more talented team, and they looked a little bit lost at times. So I look at Sunday as the true first game of the McClellan era, the game against the Washington Capitals on the second of a back-to-back, also ironically having played the first half against Toronto. All three of those teams played against each other this weekend, and they dominated that hockey game, and that was very reassuring. I mean, obviously, we're all aware of the new coach bump that seems to happen, but I do feel very encouraged by a lot of things that McClellan has said leading up to this game. It's kind of become the new slogan for the team on Saturday during their practice, and nearly, if not a little over an hour-long practice, which for an NHL team is actually quite a long time. NHL teams don't spend a lot of time on the ice during their actual practices. Their practices come in the gym, during video training. You know, the actual on-ice stuff doesn't typically take that long. He bag-skated them, and one thing that he said that all the beat writers heard when he was on the ice was, play effing hockey. You've done it your whole lives. And I tell you, that sent shockwaves through Red Wings social media, because that was the kind of fire that Red Wings fans had been lacking with Derek Lalonde. Then, you know, to Derek Lalonde's credit, there is I was a big supporter of him. I was a big proponent. I loved, in theory, the things that he had to say. But after a while, when it doesn't work, that message grows stale. And the game against the St. Louis Blues before Christmas, everyone was in agreement it was time. The team looked like they did not want to play hockey anymore, and they were in front of a home crowd and got booed off the ice. Everyone was like, okay, now you can no longer put it off. Scotty and I have been saying it since Thanksgiving, and I have friends who have been saying it since the offseason. But it boiled to a point where it's like, okay, you can no longer ignore this. And they didn't. They brought in McClellan, and his energy, his fire immediately struck a chord. And the play effing hockey, coupled with him talking about in his post-game press conference after the Maple Leafs loss, where he's talking about the team felt too robotic. And his message during the introductory press conference when he said, you can't bring a system to a team and have them play it. You have to play a system that worked with the team, resonated as well, because a lot of the criticism Lalonde had taken was that he was trying to get a team that was offensive-oriented with Patrick Kane, Alex DeBrincat, Lucas Raymond, Dylan Larkin, trying to get those guys to play a defense-first system. And defensively, they were actually okay, but what it did was it completely stifled any offensive creativity. They were told to play a system strictly by that system. And McClellan said, no, go out there and play hockey. And the game against the Washington Capitals, they dominated more than I've seen them dominate at any point other than their 6-game win streak last year when they were outscoring their problems. So that game against the Washington Capitals was highly encouraging because if what he's going to do is implement a system that benefits a bunch of undersized scoring forwards, benefit those guys' strengths rather than forcing them to play a style they've never played in their 1,300-point Hall of Fame career, Patrick Kane, I'm going to be very happy. Now, do I think they're going to make the playoffs? Probably not. They're 8 points out starting post-Christmas. It's a lot of games left, but it's a massive uphill battle to climb in a very competitive Eastern Conference. But what I'm looking for is how will the youth respond? How will the culture in the locker room take a step forward? And can they finish strong? And the first sign of that, the game against the Washington Capitals, was very encouraging on that front.
Talk to me about Patrick Kane reaching another milestone on Sunday, and what does that mean to him and this team at this point?
Well, he's second all-time among American-born players. We had that discussion before we hopped on here. He's third all-time among Americans because Brett Hull's got that dual citizenship, but second among American-born players behind Mike Modano. 1,300, he had a goal and an assist, and the goal and assist was really pretty as well. I mean, the goal, you got to give it a lot of credit to Alex DeBrincat on that because they have that connection going back to Chicago. He kind of had a running screen where he skated right across of Lindgren's face right as Kane was loading up to take the shot on the power play, and he was able to beat Lindgren. And then the assist, he got the puck behind the net. Cat swung in down low and tic-tac-toe. I mean, that pipeline those two players seem to have, it just works both ways so beautifully. And, I mean, Patrick Kane struggled a lot this season, and I think a lot of it has to do with, the message in the locker room getting stale because they were playing good defense, but they weren't winning hockey games. And so eventually it all fell apart. Well, now the message is, okay, what are you good at? Let's play that style of hockey. Go out there and play effing hockey. You know what you're going to do. Patrick Kane in particular, you're an automatic Hall of Fame player. Go out there and do what made you an automatic Hall of Fame player. The team had energy. They had life, and more importantly, they had creativity and possession of the puck after game number one. They only had, I think, 5 shots against after the first period, Gil, and that wasn't because they were playing great defense. It's because they had the puck. Yeah, if you're in the offensive zone, you're not going to give up a lot of shots against. Right. So, and a lot of that has to do with Patrick Kane. The top line, too. The top line was fantastic with Dylan Larkin, but Patrick Kane's creativity in the offensive zone when he is on is fantastic. So, I think that player we saw last year, coming back off that injury, signing with Detroit, I think that's what Patrick Kane is. But I think that a lot of the stagnation with him and the rest of the team had to do with the message in the locker room just getting stale.
Is there more pressure now on Steve Yzerman after making this coaching change? This is what, year 5 of the Yzer plan or 6? And they still, we're not at the beginning of this plan and still haven't made the playoffs. So is there more pressure on Steve Yzerman? 6. Okay.
Yeah. I was trying to do them like in 2019 or 2019 draft was his first draft. So the 2020 season was his first year. 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, and this will be the 25 season. So, 6th year. Right. So I was playing. Yeah, I think I said it after he got hired, McClellan, that is that the bullets are out of Eiserman's gun, and now it's facing him. No more heads are left to be rolled for him to use as a scapegoat because, the loan system got stale, but this roster is not perfect either. This is a roster that's wild card contender at best, which was the goal for Eiserman this year, was contend for a wild card. But, you fired your head coach, and that was your guy, your handpicked guy. We're 6 years into this. There's not much left you can use as an excuse to why this team has not succeeded other than your own choices. So, I mean, yes. Did you have a horrible hand dealt to you when you came back to Detroit? You had no prospects and a horrible cap situation, and you got screwed by the draft lottery. Absolutely. But 6 years later, Lucas Raymond's here. Moritz Seider's here. Simon Edmondson's here. All your top picks are now in the NHL, save Axel Sandin Pellikka, Nate Danielson, and Sebastian Kosa. Save those 3 guys who are more recent picks / goalies who take forever. They're not here yet. So at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, you've restocked the cabinet. Is your cabinet doing enough? And I think his amateur scouting has been superb. That has been something that's been working out. The free agent, the pro scouting is where it's very, very questionable. The Andrew Kopp signing has not aged well. The Sherratt signing's been, despite what people may say, it's been okay. In all honesty, it's been okay. It's not been terrible. Compher had a great first year. It's been awful this season. trying to think who else. Gustafson's been brutal this year. He let Gostisbehere walk. Of course, Gostisbehere might have been asking too much. David Perron was the heart and soul of the locker room. Let him walk. He traded away Jake Wallman, and you can't even say gave up traded away for nothing. He actually gave up assets to offload him, and look what he's been doing with the Sharks. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of criticism, and rightfully so, headed towards Steve Yzerman from this point going forward. Not that he's been awful. Again, his amateur scouting's been great. He's made some fantastic moves. Some of the trades he made early on paid dividends later down the line. So it's just like any general manager, Gil. It's a mixed bag. He's been pretty good overall, but now we're at a point where we're in the middle of the pack, and how he takes this team next is going to determine whether or not he's going to be the GM forever. Can he make the moves necessary to take this team and elevate them to a cup contender, or are they going to be a team like the Hurricanes were for a long time, or the Minnesota Wild still kind of are, and be just like a middle-of-the-road team that can never truly take that step towards contender status? That's the make or break point of any rebuild. It's easy to suck. It's easy to sell off assets. Can you then take those assets you gained back and make that team a contender? And now that we're at the crossroads of that rebuild. So, after this season, this season's already kind of a wash, barring some miracle. But next season, the first full year under McClellan, if it doesn't go well, I think rightfully so, people are going to be asking a lot of questions.
Well, I know you'll have your finger on the pulse of this the rest of the way. Brian, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
You can find the podcast anywhere you listen to them. You can Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Odyssey app. I always plug that. I used to work for Odyssey, so a little plug for them. YouTube as well. We get most of our viewing traffic, Gil, actually comes via YouTube these days, which I don't understand why people would want to look at this, but they do. So you can check that out as well. I'm on Twitter at Brian Fisher, LORW, on Blue Sky as well. Same moniker. Scotty's on both as well at Bentley Scotty. And then LO_Red Wings is where we're at on social media for those two apps as well.
Brian, thank you so much.
No problem, Gil. I always appreciate you inviting me on to talk about my Red Wings, win or lose, but prefer win.
Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Well, that definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon.